This Saturday night will be a revelation here on BBC One.
We've got your number.
The National Lottery unveils the big weekend draw at 7:50.
Be there.
Criminals unmasked in City Central.
Give me the case.
At 8:15.
Right then. Eyes down for a house.
And magical mysteries solved in Jonathan Creek at 9:05.
There's always an explanation.
With Birds of a Feather at 9:55, discover Saturday secrets for yourself here on BBC One.
BBC News 24 is a couple of minutes away after the weather on BBC One with John Ketley.
Hello again. Well, a quick look back at Wednesday's statistics and the sunniest places. We're at Newcastle upon Tyne and also in the Channel Islands at Jersey with 9 hours of bright sunshine. I must say, many places did stay pretty cloudy. The highest temperature was recorded at Boomer, just up the road from Newcastle, and a temperature there of 15 degrees on Wednesday afternoon. It's all changed now. It's a fairly chilly night actually on the eastern side of the country. Out in the west it's very much milder, but some rather wet weather coming in across Northern Ireland through western Scotland and across the Irish Sea as well. The lowest temperature in the far west probably about 9 or 10 degrees. That's how we'll look in the morning then, with some bright weather still for the eastern Midlands down through Lincolnshire, East Anglia and the south east, but further west and north a lot of cloud about, some patchy rain, some more persistent and still some quite sharp rain too running across Scotland. But things will improve through the day. Indeed, there will be some brighter skies developing, especially on the eastern side of Northern Ireland to the east of high ground further south, and particularly up in northeastern Scotland we could see some sunshine come the afternoon. Whereas further south we will see this thicker cloud giving the odd spot of rain coming down across the Midlands towards East Anglia. Top temperatures round about 14 to 16 degrees, depending how much brightness you get. And then looking on to Friday, we'll see further rain across the north, mainly across Scotland, down into Northern Ireland, whereas for many parts of England and Wales, it should be quite warm and bright. Good night.
Here we go. Don't know what I'm getting so excited about. I mean, it'll only be once round the block. Oh, I'm longing to go. Oh no, women. More embarrassment when he doesn't clear up after me.
Yuck.
Well, well, well. I might get him trained after all. Fancy a bit of a walk? Oh,
For every hero in history is a brutal tyrant, a ruthless aggressor, a cunning manipulator, an evil monster, a villain.
We so often allow history to be shaped by people who aren't heroes at all.
Brian Walden asks,
why do we find such people so fascinating?
Walden on Villains starts with Hitler, Friday 7:30, BBC 2.
The price of conflict is what you see me indelibly stamped with. The price of reconciliation is being able to make friends with those that you were once sworn to kill. I almost lost my life. I had to face up to being disfigured, disabled. It was probably the best thing that has happened to me, because look at all the positive aspects of my life that have grown from being injured.
From tragedy to triumph, Simon's Journey, tomorrow at 9:30 on BBC One.
Now on BBC One, Through the Night with BBC News 24.
In 15 minutes, a political career can be changed forever. A man is sold for £7.5 million. An historic institution is challenged. A community is devastated by war. That's why BBC News 24 has headlines every 15 minutes.
It's coming up to half past the hour.
For every hero in history is a brutal tyrant, a ruthless aggressor, a cunning manipulator, an evil monster, a villain.
We so often allow history to be shaped by people who aren't heroes at all.
Brian Walden asks,
why do we find such people so fascinating?
Walden on Villains starts with Hitler, Tomorrow, 7:30, BBC 2.
You're watching BBC News 24. I'm Anita McNaught. The headlines at 1:30. More NATO bombers have left Britain for missions over Yugoslavia tonight. More explosions have been reported in the capital, Belgrade. And the other headlines, a 61-year-old man has admitted carrying out the Mardi Gras attacks, a 4-year campaign of bombing and extortion. And the battle over bananas. The World Trade Organization says the US can impose sanctions on Europe. Another night of NATO air raids is underway in Yugoslavia. 2 loud explosions have been heard in the center of Belgrade, and smoke's been seen rising from the direction of the Yugoslav army headquarters. Earlier reports and pictures from the capital of Kosovo, Pristina, show wide-scale destruction. NATO's spokesmen say they've made a major breakthrough against troop units on the ground. They've destroyed a convoy and several armoured vehicles. Yesterday, as the weather cleared, the scale of the bombing increased to 400 sorties.
Residents of Pristina said there were 2 thunderous explosions heard in the city last night, and Serb television has provided pictures. Serb forces are among the first on the scene, helping to take away some of the injured. The official Yugoslav news agency says at least 10 people were killed and 8 seriously injured, but it says there may be more casualties. The agency says NATO missiles had blown up several of the city's main administrative buildings, including the bank, the post office and the city council. Many from the city's Albanian population had fled, but Yugoslav reports say there was damage to some buildings, including those used by Serb refugees resettled from Bosnia and Croatia. The city's administrator says 5 of the dead came from one Turkish family.
He have 3 daughters, husband and wife. They are Turkish family. They died here in the house, all of them. And it was terrible.
It's also reported that there were other attacks during the night on the city's airport, a TV transmitter and a fuel depot. NATO hasn't spoken of this incident, but it acknowledges that some casualties are inevitable with raids on this scale, but says they are deeply regrettable. In that light, NATO's spokesman was challenged about his description of the targeting as surgically precise.
Unfortunately, and with much regret, despite all that care, at some stages, someone will perhaps be unlucky. But as I have emphasized time and time again, we do try and take as much of that information as possible to minimize the collateral damage.
NATO has stepped up its raids across Yugoslavia. Serb television showed another attack on a fuel depot near Novi Sad. NATO says it's now confident that Serb forces in Kosovo are starting to run low on fuel and may soon be short of ammunition. Despite the Serb offer of a ceasefire, it says this is no time to pause in the bombing. NATO has formulated 5 demands to put to Mr. Milosevic. He must cease all military activity in Kosovo, withdraw his military police and paramilitary forces, accept the deployment of an international force, allow the refugees to return, and accept a political agreement. That, say NATO's leaders, is now the minimum they will accept.
He has to agree to NATO's terms. The policy of ethnic cleansing has to be reversed and be seen to be defeated. That is the absolute precondition of NATO ceasing its action. That means he gets his forces out of Kosovo, he allows an international force in, and these people are allowed to return to their homes in peace. That is the terms upon which NATO has set down right from the very beginning. Those are the terms which must be obeyed for this campaign to cease.
Under other circumstances, the pictures of the damage in Pristina might have been expected to shake public support in at least some NATO countries. But most politicians believe that the horrifying stories from the Albanian refugees are providing a solid basis of public opinion for NATO to continue. Brian Hanrahan, BBC News.
The refugee crisis in the Balkans has taken a new turn. The Yugoslav authorities have closed several border crossings which have been used by refugees to escape the conflict in Kosovo in the last 15 days. It's feared that thousands of people who were trying to cross into Macedonia and into Albania have been forced back into Kosovo. Many have been separated from their families who are on the other side of the border. At the same time, it's been discovered that Macedonian police removed tens of thousands of Kosovo Albanians from a refugee camp on their border. Aid agencies estimate up to 20,000 of them may have been bused to Albania. The Macedonia government says the rest are in new camps in other parts of Macedonia. Our correspondent Ben Brown reports from the region.
Dazed and confused, the refugees camped here on the border suddenly found themselves being herded onto buses. In the middle of the night, the Macedonian authorities had started an operation to kick out the people they never wanted here in the first place. It has outraged aid workers. They say the refugees had no idea where they were being taken and that many families have been split up. Hundreds of buses were used to move out some 30,000 people, most of them to Albania.
Family members are being separated. Let's say 4 different family members are put on 4 different buses, arriving in 4 different locations, and that's extremely distressing to these people.
The camp they've left behind is empty now. Even though there's fury at the way the refugees were moved out of here, they won't be sorry to see the back of a place where there was virtually no food, shelter, medical care or sanitation. Living here was an ordeal. Those who survived it never want to go through again. When we were here yesterday, there were tens of thousands of refugees crammed into this camp behind me. A camp where conditions were so appalling that some of them were dying. Now, suddenly, the Kosovo Albanians have all gone from here. The camp is utterly deserted. It's an extraordinary sight, and aid workers can hardly believe it. But Macedonia's president defended what amounts to the forced deportation of the refugees.
I think it's the right thing to do. Albania is their native land. It should accept the refugees, and the international community should help.
Refugees who had been waiting on the Serbian side of this border have also disappeared. Aid workers think they've been pushed back into Kosovo by Serb troops. For now, their attempt to flee has failed, and there is a strange, frightening silence here. Ben Brown, BBC News, Macedonia.
Home Affairs ministers from the European Union, meanwhile, have rejected the idea of a mass evacuation programme to take the Kosovo Albanians out of the Balkan region. At a meeting in Luxembourg, they announced instead a £70 million aid package to help care for as many of them as possible close to their homeland. The appeal by British charities to help the Kosovan refugees has raised more than £5 million in the first 24 hours. The campaign's being coordinated by the Disasters Emergency Committee, which represents 12 leading British aid agencies.
The public's response to the human tragedy they've witnessed night after night on their TV screens.
Lovely, thank you very much for your donation. Bye-bye.
Just 20 minutes after the appeal was broadcast, these operators had already received 18,000 calls. And they've kept coming. £5 million donated in less than 24 hours. The people here volunteered to answer the phones.
I'm a Ugandan refugee. I came out in the Exodus. And my way of making a donation is to give up my time.
The charities involved in the appeal have also been receiving cheques in the post. 3,000 letters to the Red Cross alone, including some from children. The money raised will be spent on water, shelter and food for the refugees.
The response is phenomenal. It seems to be a bottomless generosity that there is from the British public when they see on their screens and hear and read about people in real need.
Hello, could I have a form for the Kosovo appeal, please?
This Birmingham bank, like others across the UK, is accepting appeal donations, often from people desperate to do something to alleviate the suffering they've heard about.
They're saying children are dying, babies need food, mothers are being split up from children. I can't imagine what that must be like. I just can't.
The Kosovo appeal is the 4th one in a year coordinated by the Disasters Emergency Committee from these central London headquarters. But there's no sign of any compassion fatigue. Rather, the ongoing plight of fellow Europeans at the turn of the century has clearly touched a chord, and people want to help in whatever way they can. Peter Hunt, BBC News.
3 American soldiers captured by Yugoslavia could be released soon, according to the government of Cyprus. They were seized on the border with Macedonia last week. The acting Cypriot president, Spyros Kyprianou, is expected to fly to Belgrade later today to discuss their release with President Milosevic. A 61-year-old man has admitted to being the so-called Mardi Gras bomber who left explosive devices at branches of Barclays Bank and Sainsbury's supermarkets in and around London. Edgar Pierce pleaded guilty at the Old Bailey to 20 charges, including assault, blackmail, plotting to cause explosions and firearms offences.
Under arrest for demanding money with menaces and also for firearm offences.
This was the moment when the Mardi Gras bombers' 4-year campaign of terror came to an end. There was nothing idealistic about Edgar Pierce's motives. It was blackmail, pure and simple, and he was caught as he tried to collect the money. His campaign began with a series of bomb attacks on branches of Barclays Bank, selected at random following a dispute with the bank. He christened himself the Mardi Gras bomber to make sure his attacks would all be identified as his work. He frequently changed tactics, first targeting bank staff, then its customers. And then, after failing to get any money, he turned his attention to Sainsbury's, thinking the company would be vulnerable to attack. Both companies received threatening letters demanding money. By now, the police had begun a surveillance operation in the areas being attacked, and they had an extraordinary piece of luck. Caught on camera for the first time, Edgar Pierce crosses the road and drops a plastic bag containing one of his bombs. A few feet away, a woman passes by with a child in a pushchair. Then the device explodes. Edgar Pierce faced the same problem as any other blackmailer: how to collect the money without getting caught. He thought he had a foolproof plan, but he was wrong. The police made contact with the bomber by placing messages in the personal columns of a national newspaper addressed to Mardine Graham. He responded by asking for special cards to be placed inside copies of this magazine. While they appeared to be a promotion for Sainsbury's internet site, he knew they were cash cards, and with the correct PIN number, known only to him, they could be used to withdraw money from high street dispensers. But when Edgar Pierce tried to collect, police undercover teams were in place, ready and waiting, and he only managed to draw attention to himself by his obvious disguise and bizarre behaviour. In court today, Edgar Pierce finally admitted being the Mardi Gras bomber, pleading guilty to a total of 20 charges. The nature of his attacks and the weapons recovered from his home left police in no doubt about the danger he posed.
This was a major extortion campaign being carried out over a long period. There should be no doubt about that.
The bomber's elder brother, Ronald, who pleaded guilty to an unrelated charge of possessing a weapon, was sentenced to 12 months imprisonment, but immediately released, having already spent a year in custody. Edgar Pierce will be sentenced next week. Peter Gould, BBC News at the Old Bailey.
Police in Lancashire have called off the search for a 12-year-old girl who was swept out to sea on an inflatable dinghy. Rescuers say they've given up hope of finding Hayley Butler alive. She was playing with her twin sister and stepsister when the accident happened on Tuesday afternoon. The 2 girls managed to get back to the beach, but Hayley stayed with the dinghy. The Liberal Democrats have launched their manifesto for next month's elections to the Scottish Parliament. They're promising to recruit more doctors, nurses, teachers and end university tuition fees. They say they'd raise taxes if necessary to pay for it all. 6,000 new jobs could be created in South Wales after the government backed plans to build a gas-fired power plant at Baglin Bay near Port Talbot. The government has previously blocked the construction of new gas-fired stations in order to protect the coal industry. But the Department of Trade and Industry says it's making an exception in this case because of the large number of potential jobs. The government advice on the contraceptive pill, which sparked a major health scare 4 years ago, is being changed. Restrictions on 7 brands of the pill, which had been linked to an increased risk of blood clots, have been lifted, and the Department of Health says women should make their own decisions with the advice of their doctors. The World Trade Organization has ruled in favour of America in its dispute with Europe over bananas. The WTO says the European Union broke international trade rules by giving preferential treatment to banana growers from the Caribbean. The Americans have already imposed sanctions on European firms, and the Scottish cashmere industry says 1,000 jobs are at risk as a result.
Officials from the US Embassy visiting a knitwear factory in Scotland. Goods from here sold to the US had a penalty tariff slapped on them in retaliation for European discrimination against American bananas. But if Europe accepts the ruling made last night by the World Trade Organization, the threat to this factory will be lifted.
If the panel has ruled, as I understand it has done, that the EU regime is illegal, then the answer is very simple. That regime should be fixed.
The World Trade Organization, the body policing international trade, said Europe had unfairly favoured Caribbean banana growers. But the European Commission denied this was a total victory for the US.
The fact is that the arbitration award which has been made to the Americans, in terms of the damages they've suffered, is just over 1/3 of the amount that they had asked for. So if they call that a victory, good luck to them.
So, a partial victory for the United States. But this row is now about a mere £120 million worth of exports, a drop in the ocean of international trade. A compromise deal seems the most likely outcome. Greg Wood, BBC News, at the US Embassy in London.
The headlines as we come up to 1:45. More NATO bombers have left Britain for missions over Yugoslavia tonight. Explosions have been reported in the capital, Belgrade. A 61-year-old man, Edgar Pierce, has admitted carrying out the Mardi Gras bomb attacks on branches of Barclays Bank and Sainsbury's supermarkets. And as you've just heard, the battle over bananas, the World Trade Organization has said the US can impose sanctions on Europe. You're watching BBC News 24.
America, a diverse nation. They ride bareback. They send rockets to the moon. They play hard, have a spirit of adventure. And they take their sport very seriously.
On the sunny side of the street.
But what do they really care about? Take a nighttime trip stateside. USA Direct. Today, 2:30 on News 24 and BBC One.
Sport now with Darren Jordan.